recently I was asked one question on my blog. It was referring to a video that was taken here a year or two ago. It seems I think I was talking something about dream, how though we see many people in a dream, it's only we who have projected it and are seeing it. And I think I said, we are the only person who projected it. And I said, no, that's not correct. We are the only ego who has projected it. It's not the person who has projected it, but the ego. So I was asked about the difference between the person and the ego. We all now experience ourselves as if we are a person, but that which experiences ourselves as a person is the ego. We are not this person, because before this person was born, it didn't exist. After it dies, it's not going to exist. So we cannot be the person we now take ourselves to be. Just like we have now projected this person and are experiencing it as ourselves, when this dream comes to an end, another dream will start. Again, we'll project another person and again experience that person as ourselves, and we'll go through the same thing again and again and again. So there is a distinction between the ego and the person. The person is basically a package of all the upadhis, all the adjuncts, with which the ego identifies itself currently. All these upadhis are centered around a body. So the person is the body and the mind and all the other associating attributes. If the body is sitting, I am sitting. If the mind is thinking, I am thinking. But the mind is, again, we experience it as if it's centered in the body. All our thinking is going on we talk about it's going on in my head. As if everything is going on in a certain space within our head. This is the illusion we now experience. So that whole package of body and mind and all the attributes of the mind, that all makes up the person that we now seem to be. This person is externally visible. People see us as other people see us as a person. But what we are investigating, when we try to attend to ourselves, we shouldn't be attending to this person. We are trying to attend to who is the one who is experiencing this person as I. That is what we're trying to investigate. That is the ego. The person is all the jada portion. What we really are is the chit portion. And the ego is the knot that binds these two together. When these two are separated, as in sleep, there is no ego. Because the ego has no independent existence. But as soon as the ego comes into existence, a whole set of adjuncts called a person comes into existence. Through this person is the window through which we see the world, or the window through which we project the world. It's through the five senses that we project the world. We say project as if there's a world out there, but actually it's all in our own mind. All that we experience of the world, what is it? Sights, sounds, tastes, smells, and tactile sensations. That's all the world consists of in our experience. But we take it to be something outside, independent of ourselves. But in fact, it's all our own perceptual experience is happening within. It all appears in our own mind. So the ego expands as the mind expands as this person, and the person expands as all this world. Well, the person is the window through which this whole world is expanded, through which the mind expands as the world. But the root of all this is the person is innocent. Bhagavan used to say, people who do severe tapas, physical austerities, it's like beating the chair on which a criminal is sitting. It's not the chair is at fault, it's the criminal. So the criminal in this case is the ego. It's this ego that has robbed us of the wealth of what we really are. So the ego is the culprit. The person is innocent. It's the one who takes this person to be itself, but is the guilty party. And that is the one we should investigate, and if we investigate it, we'll find he doesn't exist and the problems will all be over. He or she or whatever you call it, it doesn't exist. Yes?
Does it mean that after the ego dies, the person continues to exist?
In whose view, after you wake up from a dream, does the dream person continue to exist? In a dream, we rise as an ego, we project a person. As that person, we go through so many experiences in that dream world. But as soon as the dream comes to an end, the person ceases to exist, the world ceases to exist, everything ceases to exist. That's why Bhagavan says when the ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. When the ego doesn't exist, nothing else exists. So everything is just an expansion of the ego. The root of all this vast universe, all this science, art, not all this vast knowledge we have, it all comes down to the ego, the one who is experiencing all this. And this ego appears only in waking and dream. In sleep, it disappears. And when it disappears in sleep, everything else disappears along with it. When it reappears in either waking or dream, other things appear along with it. So what is real, Bhagavan said, what actually exists is only Atma Swarupa. Atma Swarupa means our own essential self. That is the pure self-awareness. That's all that actually exists. That is the rope. The ego is the snake. If we look at the snake very carefully, we see that it's only a rope, and then the problems are over.
Yeah.
What I really is just pure self-awareness, but we have constructed it as a person, as whatever. But that person, this ego is there's one small little worm-like creature. But I don't know if you've seen them. In India you get them. You see them, they move along. It's like they have a sucker on each end, and they raise up, they go down, and then they move like that. Bhagavan said the ego is like that. It holds one form, grasps another form, and it leaves that form, and it's constantly leaving one, it grasps another. So now we experience ourselves as this particular person. But before this person was born, we were dreaming. This is a dream. We are now dreaming ourselves to be this person. In previous lives we were dreaming ourselves as another person. So that's the nature of the ego. It's not any particular form. There's no particular form we can point out and say this is ego. That's why Bhagavan says it calls it Uruvatrapeya Hande. That means the formless phantom ego. It has no form of its own, but it seems to exist only by grasping form.
Yeah. So,
and because it exists only by grasping form means because it's formless, it doesn't have any arms or legs to grasp anything, so it grasps things by being aware of them, by attending to them. So forms means any phenomena, anything other than ourself is a form. We are the formless ego, and we grasp other things which are forms and take them to be ourself, or take them to be things. I am seeing this. It's all. Everything, every experience is centered around the I. So that I is the ego. So the ego seems to exist only so long as it's aware of anything other than itself. That's what Bhagavan means by a grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping form, it feeds itself, it nourishes itself and grows strong. So it's by attending to other things that the ego seems to exist. Therefore, the only way to destroy it is to try to be aware of itself alone. If the ego tries to attend to itself alone, tries to be aware of itself alone, it vanishes. Because it can't stand without anything to hold on to, and it is nothing. So if it tries to hold on to itself, it vanishes. Tedinalotum pidicum, Bhagavan says. If sought, it takes flight. Like yesterday I was telling you a story Bhagavan used to tell about the bridegroom's friend in the party. He wasn't actually a friend of the bridegroom, he didn't belong to either party, but he was posing as a friend of both, and he had a jolly good time for 5 days, feasting away happily. But when they started to inquire about who he is, he disappeared. Such is this ego. So if we try to do any other sadhana, we are assuming that we have this ego, and we try to do yoga, we try to do meditation, we try to do japa, we try to do this, that, so many things to get rid of this thing that we now take ourselves to be. But since whatever we do is based on the assumption that we are that thing. But Bhagavan said, don't make that assumption. If you make that assumption, you're defeated from the start. And until you question that assumption, that I am what I now seem to be, which is, whatever we now seem to be is ego. I mean, the ego is what takes itself to be but the ego is what seems to be all this. So long as this ego is the base of our experience of ourself, we cannot get rid of it. The only way to get rid of it is to investigate it, to look at it carefully, and it vanishes.
How would you advise us to go about that, the Atma Vichara?
There's only, we can investigate ourselves only by observing ourselves, by attending to ourselves, by looking carefully at ourselves. Bhagavan has expressed this in so many ways, and he's given clues like whenever your attention is distracted by anything else, any thought, because whatever we experience, every perception, every idea, every feeling, every emotion, everything is a thought, in the sense it's just a mental phenomena. So whatever phenomena appears, to whom does it appear? It's to me. So whatever we experience, we are there as the experiencer. So instead of attending to the experience, we should be attending to the experiencer. Because this experiencer doesn't actually exist, it seems very elusive. But the more we just try to be attentively aware of ourselves alone, because it is we who have risen as this ego, or who seem to have risen as this ego. So if we just try to be attentively aware of ourselves alone, we will get distracted. And again we pull back. We will get distracted, again we pull back. That's what I said yesterday. It's like a small child learning to walk. Have you ever seen a child who's given up trying to walk? But how many times do they have to fall before they manage to walk? But they persevere until they can learn to balance. So we will fail any number of times. It doesn't matter, however many times what matters is that we continue trying. Succeeding isn't the important thing. If we're trying, success is assured. So we shouldn't be looking for success. We should be concentrating on just trying. And the success will one day come and we won't even notice it because we won't be there to notice it. We're constantly involved with outward things. But whatever the outward things we're involved with, we're always aware what is inside ourselves. There is never a moment when we're not aware of ourselves. Now we're confusing ourselves with outward things, with body, with mind, with this person, and we say, I do this, I do that. But that I is always there. Have you ever experienced anything without experiencing yourself as the experiencer of it? So what is inside is always there, always known. But when you say there's absolutely nothing new to know,
We can return to it in action.
you can return, but you don't even have to return to it. You are that already. We talk about returning to it, about turning back inside. Because we're now outward facing, it seems to be necessary to turn inside. But when we actually succeed in turning 100% inside, 180 degrees turn, we will find that we've always been aware of that and that alone. There's never been anything else. But because now we seem to be aware of other things, it seems to be necessary to make the effort to turn back to ourselves. And this effort has to go on until this illusion that there's anything outside us, so long as this the illusion persists in any form whatsoever, we have to continue turning back within. So it doesn't matter what appears, whether it's heaven or hell or whatever it may be, any type of phenomena exist only because we have risen as an ego. And we rise as an ego by grasping those phenomena, by being aware of them. So whatever phenomena appears, it doesn't matter. To whom has it appeared? Who is experiencing it? I am. Turn our attention back. We don't have to be asking the question. When Bhagavan put it in a question, he was giving us a clue how we can divert our attention back. Whatever we may be experiencing, it doesn't matter. We always have the option. We always have a choice from moment to moment. Do we attend to the experienced or do we attend to the experiencer? This is the choice we have at every moment. And we feel I've got this job, I've got responsibility, I've got family, I've got this, that. So many things are taking up my time. I've got very little time for this Atma Vichara. But according to Bhagavan, all our responsibilities, everything whatever we are destined to do, we will be made to do. If we're destined to have a job and to earn money and to take care of our family, to buy a house, all these things, it will happen our effort is we seem to be making great effort, but actually our effort is unnecessary because it will go on automatically. Our destiny will make it all happen. Bhagavan said, if you're destined to work, you cannot avoid working. If you're not destined to work, you cannot work even if you seek the work. So outward life is entirely going on according to destiny. Of course, our free will is interfering. When painful experiences come, we want to avoid them. When we see how other people are living, they're so much better off than us. Other people have got so many things that we haven't got. Wouldn't it be nice to be like that? We make effort to earn more money, to buy a bigger car, to have a bigger house, to have a more beautiful wife, a more handsome husband, whatever it is. We're constantly seeking things other than ourselves, thinking that will make our happiness. But we're not, however much effort we make for all these external things, we end up experiencing only what we're destined to experience. Not an iota more than that, not an iota less than that. So we cannot actually, we're free to make any amount of effort externally, but we are not free to, whatever effort we make will not produce any result, because what we are destined to experience, that alone we will experience. Often we make great effort for the things which we're destined to experience. That it's my destiny to become a rich businessman. I make great effort in my business. I have great desire to become rich. I become rich. I think, because of my effort I've earned so much money. Even if I hadn't wanted to become a rich businessman, it was in my destiny. I would have become a rich businessman anyway, even if I hadn't wanted it at all. But I'm using my free will to go along with the destiny, thereby I'm creating more fresh agamya. Or sometimes I'm not destined to be a rich businessman, but I really want to be. I make all sorts of efforts. But the more efforts I make, the more money I lose, and I end up a complete pauper. That is also destined. But so whatever effort we make doesn't change what is actually going to happen. So, therefore, Bhagavan puts this very succinctly in the note he wrote to his mother in 1898 when she wanted him to come back home to Madurai with her. He was not talking in those days. So the people there, when she was pleading with him to come back, the people who were around said, at least write something for her, even if you don't want to give a reply. Then he wrote this note, in which he wrote, Avarava Prarabdha Prakaram. That means according to the Prarabdha, or according to their Prarabdha. That means according to the Prarabdha of each person. Adakanavan. Adakanavan means he who is for that. That's an indirect reference to God. He who is for that. Avarava Prarabdha Prakaram Adakanavan Angangirindu. That means being there, being in each place, being in the heart of each person. Artuvipan. Artuvipan means he'll make them dance. We are like puppets. Bhavan is a puppet master who's making us dance. So he will make us dance in whatever way we're destined to dance. Then he says, whatever is never to happen will not happen, however much effort you make. Whatever, or he didn't even say you make, he said, whatever is to happen, whatever is never to happen, endrum naduvadadu, enmuichikanum naduvadu. That means whatever is not destined to happen, whatever is not to happen, whatever is never to happen, will not happen in spite of any amount of effort that is made. He doesn't say whatever effort you made, but it implies that. Whatever effort, but he says in a very impersonal way. Whatever effort is made will not change it. It will what is not to happen will not happen. And whatever is to happen will not stop whatever obstacle you try, and however much you try to obstruct it, however much you try to avoid it, to prevent it, it's going to happen. Iduve tinnam, this is certain. Ahalin monamai irake nandru, therefore keeping quiet is best. Because we cannot change, we are free to want to change things, we're free to make effort to change things, but we are not free to change anything in even an iota.
As you're speaking, I'm really sort of struggling with it in my mind because it's so counterintuitive.
It is, yeah, because we feel where we are the doer.
Where's the practice?
Yeah. Who is going to office every day and earning all that money? I am. It's my money. I've worked hard for it. So why should I give all my money in taxes to the government? And what are all these lazy people who aren't working? Why should they be getting benefits? This sort of attitude we have, because we think we are the doer. We think we are the one who is doing all this. But actually, Adakanavan Angangiruntu Artuvipan. He who is for that, being in each and every place, that means in the heart of each person, Artuvipan. He's making us dance.
So how does our practice sit in that?
So that means we have a choice. At each moment, we have a choice. Either we make effort to externally, to avoid things that we don't like, to experience things that we do like. Either we use our free will in that way, or we can use our free will, as Bhagavan recommends, Ahalim monamai irake nandru. Monamai irake means either it can be taken as silently being, or being silent is good. What he's indirectly saying there, just keep quiet. The destiny will take care of itself. The only effort you have to make is to keep quiet, not to concern yourself with these things. And how do we keep quiet? What does monomayirake mean? What does it actually mean, keeping quiet? It doesn't mean just sitting back, I'm not going to bother. That is not monomayirake. The ego is still dancing around. Even if we're sitting on our couch watching our television or whatever, not making any effort to do anything, our mind is still active. We're still interested in whatever we see on the television or things. Monamayirake means the mind should be quiet. And the mind, if we allow the ego to rise, the mind is active. Because the ego rises by being aware of something other than itself. In order to be aware of other things, the mind has to move outwards. So awareness of other things is a mental activity. So long as there's mental activity, there's noise. So when Bhagavan says, Mona Mayirake, being quiet, that means being silent. That means being no rising of ego. If we allow the least rising of ego, the noise starts. If we want to be quiet, we have to not allow this ego to rise. The only way to not allow this ego to rise is to attend to ourselves. If we attend to anything else, mind is going out towards those things, and we're not keeping quiet. So, if as far as the outward things, all our responsibilities, we have family, we have so many responsibilities we have. These, according to Bhagavan, if you concentrate on attending to yourself, all these things will happen automatically. You need not worry about them.
Wonderful.
But that is why this path of self-investigation is also the path of self-surrender. But are any of us, is anyone in this room, is anyone willing to let go yet? I'm certainly not ready to raise my hand, because I know it would be a total lie. I'm not ready to let go. I still take myself to be this person. I still feel I have to make effort to, when food is put in front of me, at least I have to make the effort to eat. According to Bhagavan, you don't even have to do that, because you'll be made to do it. If we could have so much faith in Bhagavan, if we really believe Bhagavan, not one of us in this room actually believes Bhagavan, to tell the truth. Me least of all. Because if we really believe Bhagavan, we would be quiet now itself. Why are we waking up every morning? Because we don't believe Bhagavan. Waking up means we're rising of the ego. We rise of the ego because we're not ready to leave everything in Bhagavan's hands. If we are ready to leave everything in Bhagavan's hand, we wouldn't even rise as his ego.
What would we do?
What?
How do you mean? Yes. We wouldn't get up in the morning?
Yeah, we wouldn't not get up in the sense that we wouldn't, I'm not saying we wouldn't get out of bed. We wouldn't rise as the ego. There would be no waking and dream. Waking and dream is the result of the rising of the ego. The rising of the ego is a result of our lack of faith in Bhagavan's teachings. If we really believe Bhagavan, we will be doing as he advised his mother, Mona Mayirake Nandru. Being quiet is good.
Be silent, he said in that quotation.
Yes.
I think be silent means acceptance, and accept
Yes.
whatever there is.
Yes.
Not react to it.
Yes.
That's one way of...
Yes, but what is? If we have to accept what is, well, what actually is? According to Bhagavan, what actually is only self-awareness. But we are aware of so many other things. Why are we aware of all these things? Because we've risen as an ego. So it's not merely accepting whatever pleasures or pains come to us in life with equanimity. That is good, but that is not sufficient. Because so long as we're experiencing those things, we've already one step away from complete self-surrender. Because we have to rise as an ego to experience all these things. So it's only partial surrender, accepting all the things that happen in our life. That is necessary. Anyone following a spiritual path has to learn acceptance of whatever pleasures or pain come according to destiny. We have to accept it. But that is not total self-surrender. That is partial self-surrender. Total self-surrender is when we don't even rise to experience these things. That is total. All these other things, we're surrendering everything except ourselves. If we accept whatever happens, so I'm surrendering all my likes and dislikes, all my desires, everything. I'm surrendering mine, the mamakara. But I'm not surrendering the ahankara. Because so long as we're experiencing any of these things, it's as ahankara, but we're experiencing them. So real self-surrender, absolute total self-surrender, is only when we give up this ahankara. And the only way to give up this ahankara is to turn our attention within. As Bhagavan says in Nanya, not giving even the slightest room to the rising of any chintana except Atma chintana, that alone is giving ourselves totally to God. Giving up all the mamakara, all the mine, everything that is mine, that is like cutting the leaves and branches of a tree. But however much you cut the leaves and branches of a tree, so long as the root is still alive, more leaves and branches will continue. So it's an endless business, giving up desires, giving up mine. There's no end to it because it keeps on sprouting in one form or another. The only way to get rid of everything is to cut up the root. The root is the ego, the ahankara.
So what should one do after acceptance?
What are you accepting?
Everything that is happening.
Everything that's happening. How does everything come into existence? Ahandayan dayan anatum undaham. When the ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. That's why I say, when we accept everything, by accepting it, we are giving up our likes and dislikes. We are giving up the mamakara. But we are not giving up the ahankara, who is the one who is experiencing everything. So in order to give up the ahankara who is experiencing everything, we have to give not even the slightest room to the rising of any thought other than the Atma Chintana. That's the self-attentiveness. We have to refrain from attending to anything other than ourselves. Tend only to ourselves. That is the only way to surrender ourselves completely and absolutely. So Bhagavan has given us a shortcut. Okay, if you've got a very dense bush, you can't even see the root. It is necessary. Everyone knows it's necessary. We have to, so long as we've got lots of strong desires, lots of strong likes and dislikes, we can't even begin tackling the ego. We have to cut back the leaves and branches to a certain extent. But we shouldn't waste our time endlessly cutting leaves and branches, because it'll endlessly be coming. Cut to a certain extent to see the root. Once we see the root, forget everything else, just go for the root itself. So Bhagavan has given us a shortcut. That's why no other sadhanas are necessary. If we are willing to follow Bhagavan's path, no other sadhana is necessary. If we're not willing to follow Bhagavan's path, all the other sadhanas are good, but they cannot lead us any further than bringing us back to Bhagavan's path. Sooner or later, we can give up mind any number of times, any amount of mind we can give up, but until we give up the I to whom all that mind belongs, we cannot enter the kingdom of moksha. Yeah, sorry, too much.
I'm saying the best sadhana is self-inquiry, because often when I practice self-inquiry,
yeah,
I'm faced with a blank throughout my day.
Who is faced with a blank?
Well, when I ask myself that question constantly, who, I even get to that point, who is faced with a blank?
Yes.
And I say that to myself throughout the day.
You say, I say that to myself.
And
So
I'm faced with a blank.
Okay, right. Well then, what more do you want than a blank?
That is the question.
Yes. Because we want something more than that. That we're always looking for some result.
Yeah.
That's why Bhagavan said, you are not going to attain anything new. There's absolutely nothing to it. There's no such thing as spiritual attainment. Okay, in ordinary course we talk of spiritual attainment, but in actual fact there is no such thing as spiritual attainment. There is absolutely nothing to attain. Anything you attain is not spiritual, because it's something new, it appears and it's going to disappear. What we are seeking is what is always here, what we are always experiencing. It's not even as if what we're seeking is present but it's hidden. It's never hidden. It's always there in broad. I mean, we're all saying I. Who is there who doesn't say I constantly? So it's that I, shorn of all the adjuncts, that is all we are looking for. That is what we're constantly aware of. The basic fundamental awareness, that is what is real. And that is what we're always experiencing. So we're not trying to attain anything, we're trying to get rid of everything. Yes?
Michael, would you talk a little bit about your personal relationship with Arunaya? like living there for 2 decades or whatever.
You said one word there, personal.
Yeah.
This person, it means a person called Michael. Is this person real?
Okay,
So,
maybe we were...
yeah, okay.
Can you tell me some stories about Aranachala?
Yes, I could, but what I suggest is, there are stories about Arunachala. For instance, there's a story of the appearance of Arunachala. It's a mythological story, but it's a story which has a symbolic meaning.
About the light?
The light.
And the top and the bottom?
And the top and the bottom, yes.
God, can you tell that story one time?
Yeah, yeah.
So I know that story.
Yeah, okay.
I wouldn't mind hearing it.
Okay, but the point of that story is Vishnu represents Brahma represents the buddhi, the intellect, the outward going mind. So he flies to the top, but he can never reach the top. But when we follow the intellect, we will delude ourselves into believing that we've achieved something. We've discovered so much science, all these things, we know all about this world. How proud is the intellect of humanity? Let's personify humanity. Humanity has a huge pride in its intellect. All the things we're so much smarter than all the other animals. No other animal knows all the science we know. They haven't built all these buildings. They haven't created all this art, all these wonderful things.
It still would never end.
Yeah, but we lie. Brahma came back telling a lie.
Yeah.
Because we delude ourselves. Whereas Vishnu represents the ego. The ego, when the ego penetrates down, that means penetrates within, the ego can never get to the bottom. Because the ego can, however deep we dive within, go within ourselves, the ego can never get to the bottom, because at the bottom there is no ego. So the ego subsides in complete humility. So the Vishnu, burrowing down as a boar, as a pig, understood eventually he'll never be able to reach the bottom. So he came back with humility and admitted his failure. That is when we're ready to admit that as this ego we cannot achieve anything. So this story has a symbolic meaning.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I didn't actually catch the symbolic meaning.
Yes.
I actually heard the story.
Yes.
Nice. But so
Bhagavan explained this meaning, and Murugan wrote it in a verse which begins Buddhi Ahankaram Purambeda Ongo. That's the verse that explains the tattva of Arunachala. It's at the beginning of the 5 hymns. And there Bhagavan says, but Vishnu represents, that Brahma represents the Buddhi, Vishnu represents Ahankaram.
So did you walk on the mountain many times in all those years?
I think I climbed to the top, if I remember correctly, twice, I think. Once I went on my own when I was first there. I think even before I knew about Pradakshina, one of the first things I did was I went to the top. After several years after that, with a group of friends, shortly after Deepam, I once went to the top. But those are the only times I went to the top of the hill. But during the 20 years I was there, for most of that time, except towards the end when the first few months I didn't know so much about production. I used to do occasionally. But once I learned more about how much Bhagavan recommended it, I was going around every day. For most of the 20 years I was there.
So was there a relationship with the mountain itself that came about?
I suppose so. One of the things I believe about the efficacy of Giri Pradakshina, one thing Sadhuam pointed out, there's another story about Arunachala is how human beings first found out about the efficacy of Pradakshina. It's another mythological story. There was a king called Vajrangata Pandya. He was one day hunting in the forests around Arunachala, and he was riding on his horse, and he saw a civet with a type of wild cat, And he gave chase on his horse, wanting to catch that civet. Unknown to any of them, that civet happened to run all around Arunachala. And the horse also, of course, ran after it. When they had completed a round, the civet and horse both fell down dead, and the king fell down onto the ground, and out of the dead bodies of these two animals, two heavenly beings, two Gandharvas or some celestial beings, rose up. And they thanked the king, saying that they had been cursed, but they should take the form of a horse and a civet until they do protection around Arunachala, and then they will regain their previous form. And when Dragana Pandya said, I've also gone round, why am I lying here then? Why nothing has happened to me? And they said, you, in order to benefit from Arunachala protection, you need to walk round barefoot, not ride on a vehicle, not ride on a horse. But they said, you gain one benefit from going round, because we can tell you in your previous life, you were not just a lowly king on earth, you were Indra, the king of heaven. So if you want to regain your previous position, you should follow our example, you should also go around the hill. So for 3 years, he went round the hill 3 times a day. And of course when he started, he did it was with great desire. What is this, having a mere little kingdom on earth, when I could be the king of heaven itself? So with that great desire, with a great kamyata, it was with great desire to achieve an end, he started. But after 3 years of going round, discrimination dawned on him, a clarity came to his mind. And at the end of it, when Lord Shiva appeared before him in a human form, in his humanoid form or whatever, and asked him what boon he wanted to pray for, he had completely lost the desire to become Indra, and he prayed only for Sayuja. Sayuja means oneness, merging in Shiva. So the benefit of going round the hill, though we may not even be aware of it,
Isn't that higher?
of course it's higher, of course it's higher. Becoming one with Shiva means that means Atmajnana, that means completely merging in the source from which we appeared. Indra is also in ignorance, because he takes himself, I am this body, I am the king of the heaven. So it's an alternative state of ignorance. Maybe a slightly more blissful state of ignorance, but it's still ignorance. But the benefit of what that story illustrates, as Sadhguru often used to say, that story illustrates the benefit of going around Arunachala is it kindles the power of discrimination. It creates a clarity within our mind. And that clarity will enable us to understand that the only way to attain Siva Sayuja, that is to merge in our source, is to turn within. So we will get that clarity, that discrimination, and that love to turn within. Because why we now don't have sufficient love to turn within? Because we still believe we're going to get happiness from this external world. So when the clarity comes to our mind, then only we will develop that love to turn within, we will turn within, and we will merge in our source.
Is that what you were pointing out earlier today, perhaps, when you said, hey, be careful about becoming too devotional around Arunachala?
Very, very dangerous, most dangerous God there is.
Dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you go to Arunachala with great desire, even if you go to achieve some material end, Arunachala won't let you off the hook. Arunachala will keep you going round and round and round until eventually your desire is completely burnt, and then you will be burnt along with it. The thing is, Hinduism is not one religion. It is a whole family, or it's a whole set of beliefs. Hindu philosophy was divided into 6 main forms of philosophy, and within each of those there were sub forms. So there are so many different philosophies, different religious sects within Hinduism. Each had all agree moksha is the ultimate end, but each had their own different idea of moksha. As you say, in the view of some people, if you the conventional Vaishnavite Bhakta, for example, they believe moksha is going to Vaikuntha and living with Vishnu. It's a duality. So there's so many different conceptions, so you can't say this is the Hindu conception, because there are so many Hindu conceptions of what moksha is. But according to Bhagavan, what moksha means, it means liberation, it means freedom. What is bondage? Bondage is nothing but the ego. When Bhagavan describes what ego is in verse 24 of Uludunaptu, that the body doesn't say I, Satchit doesn't rise, but between these two rises an I. That is, he lists it, it's ego, it's soul, it's jiva, it's subtle body, it's bondage, it's chijjadagranti, it's mind. He lists all these things. They're all different descriptions of this ego. So one of the things he describes there is bandham. The ego itself is the bondage, because all bondage starts from the ego. So as long as this ego exists, there is no liberation. Liberation means freeing ourselves from this ego is liberation. That is moksha. So the state of complete egolessness is alone moksha. All this mythology, when we talk mythology, we interpret according to Bhagavan's teaching. But if you go to other schools of thought, they will interpret the same stories in very different ways. I mean, yeah, because these mythological, that's the beauty of the Puranas, the mythological stories, the Puranas and the Ityasas and things. The beauty of them is they can be interpreted in so many different ways at so many different levels. If you hear the normal Puranikas telling the stories, they will interpret the stories of the Mahabharata in so many different ways according to the needs of different people.
So coming back to what you said, which is that Bhagavan would describe moksha or liberation as freedom from the ego.
Yes.
And bondage is that ego.
Yes.
Granthi would have very specific
Yes.
described. So someone like Bhagavan, when he was young, when he was 16, 17, he had that experience
Yes.
where he saw his own body
Yes.
as something insentient and almost dead.
Yes.
And he experienced that I'm not the body, but I'm the one that knows the body.
Yes.
That is
Yes.
And so after that, of course, he spent many years meditating in the caves and things like that. Then so essentially a gnani like that,
Yes.
was liberated while living, because then he lived in an egoless state. Is that right to say?
That is after he described that death experience in words in order to show us the way. But he himself said, though he described it in so many words, it was actually an experience beyond words. In a flash, he got that intense fear of death, and he was so intensely, in some books it's written, he dramatized death by lying down. It wasn't like that. He wasn't doing any drama. He was just so petrified of death. If this body dies, am I going to die with it? He was so terrified, he just lay down, and it wasn't just enacting death. The body actually died. For Bhagavan said about 20 minutes, there was no heartbeat, respiration or anything. Completely stopped. He actually died. Because of the force with which his mind went inwards, the body died. At the moment his mind went in, everything, from his perspective, everything was destroyed. It was the end of everything. From our perspective, according to divine grace, after 20 minutes his heart started working again, and he seemed to have a life for another 54 years after that. That's all in our view. In his view there was no body, no world, nothing after that. And all the people say he meditated in Patalalinga and all these things. That wasn't meditation. He was just in the traditional descriptions they describe the 7 jnana bhumikas. 7 stages of jnana. I can't remember what the first 3 are, but the last 4 are Brahma Vid, Brahma Varya, Brahma Vigvarya, Brahma Varishta, something like that. I can't even remember the names properly. But they're 4 different, described as 4 different jnana bhumikas. Bhagavan said about these are all the same state. The difference between these is only difference from the onlooker's perspective. Some jnanis, the Brahma Varishtas, their bodies, they're completely unaware of the body, of course all jnanis are unaware of the body, but in the view of others they seem to be just like they're completely unaware of the body. Whereas the Brahmavid acts just like a normal person. Bhagavan, outwardly, he went through each of these stages. At first he was Brahma Varishta, which is supposedly the highest, in that as he was in Patalingam, the insects were eating his thighs. He wasn't even aware of it. And when Seshadri Swami told people that he was in there, and they came and lifted him out, because for several weeks he had been sitting in the same position, the insects had eaten his thighs, and it was also a damp ground. All the pus and blood had coagulated, and Bhagavan was actually stuck there on the muddy ground. So when they lifted it, all the wounds opened and blood started flowing out again. So completely unaware of the body he was. That is Brahma Varishta state. Then for some time after that, he was responsive. When people offered him food, he would eat. That is the one stage supposedly below that. Then after some time, he started responding, writing. Then he came back to speaking, and in later years, for most of the next 54 years, he was acting as a perfectly normal person. There was absolutely no difference in his experience. According to this classification of the Jnana 7 Bhumis, he was from the highest, he went down, down, down to the 4th one. But that's just in our self-ignorant outlook. For him, there was absolutely no difference. Bhagavan once said, when people were talking, because many people had the impression at first that Bhagavan experienced something in Madurai, then he had to come to Tiruvannamalai, do tapas, and only after some time he got moksha. Or people, even for many years, people thought he's still doing tapas. They didn't accept him, and people didn't immediately recognize that he's a Jiva Mukta. So people had all sorts of ideas. When people were talking about this, once Bhagavan said, the sun that rose in Madurai is shining even in Tiruvannamalai. Nothing has changed. That was his way of saying everything that was to be attained was attained in Madurai. The story was over there. There's no difference since then.
Essentially, for someone like a Gnani like Bhagavan,
Yeah.
who has experience, whose ego is dying,
Yes.
there is no more need for that ego to cling on to any other form
No.
anymore.
Yes.
So effectively,
There is, in Bhagavan's view, there is no form to cling to. There is no body, there is no mind, there is no world, there is nothing. Because all these things come into existence with the ego, and the ego is destroyed, all these things disappear. So Bhagavan said, the jnani is like a person sleeping in a cart. Whether the cart is moving or standing still, or the bullocks are unyoked, the person who's sleeping in the cart isn't aware of any of it. So also for the jnani who's sleeping in this body, actually for the jnani there is no body, but in our view, the jnani, Bhagavan says he's sleeping in the body, and he's unaware whether the body is active, or sitting quiet, or like the bulls unyoked, completely in a state of, from the outward perspective, in a state of samadhi. Makes no difference at all for him, because he's fast asleep, unaware of it all. So whatever we say about the state of the jnani is wrong, because we see the jnani as a person, whereas according to Bhagavan, jnana alone is the jnani. Jnana is awareness, self-awareness. That is what we actually are. That alone is the jnani. Bhagavan sometimes used to, when people asked about jnanis, is this person a jnani, is that person a jnani? Bhagavan said, no, there's only one jnani. And they said, who is that? Bhagavan, are you the only jnani? No, you are the only jnani. You are that. Because all the jnanis we see, so long as we are ignorant, all the jnani, if we see a jnani as a body, we are seeing a jnani as an ajnani. If we take this body to be Bhagavan, we are seeing Bhagavan as an ajnani, as a person like us.
So actually the word vikalpa
Yes,
is described by people in
various different ways.
Actually, I read somewhere, or maybe I heard one of your road talks, where you describe it as vikalpa meaning differentiation.
Yes,
and vikalpa meaning non-differentiation.
that's one of the meanings, yes.
And so, can that egoless state,
Yes,
which is often called as nirvikalpa, I know you don't like
yes,
the word,
yes,
technical words like
Yes.
samadhi, nevertheless, which is described as nirvikalpa samadhi or nirvikalpa sahaj samadhi,
yeah.
can it be said to be, rather than a catatonic state of self-absorption, can it also be described as a state of awakeness, but a feeling of oneness, like a non-differentiation?
Yes, but there is only one. It's not just a feeling of oneness among manyness, because there is no manyness. Manyness comes into existence with the ego. When the ego goes, there is no manyness. There is only oneness. So there's no point in our trying to break our heads trying to understand this, because we cannot understand the state of jnana. Because the state of jnana is the state where there is absolutely no ego, no mind, nothing. And not only, jnana is not the state where the ego has been destroyed. Jnana is the state where the ego has never existed at all. So we cannot, how can this ego possibly grasp the state in which it has never existed? So there's no point in trying to understand the state of a jnani. We didn't come to Bhagavan to learn about the state of a jnani. We came to learn what we are. We didn't come to know about Nirvikalpa Samadhi or Sahaja Nirvikalpa Samadhi. These are all words, ideas for us. Until we actually experience that, they're just words. So there's only one thing we need to know. Who am I? That's all we need to try and know. What is Samadhi? Irrelevant question. These are, when we hear big words like Samadhi, we don't quite know what they mean. But we think, oh, that must be wonderful, I must try and seek that. I'll be somehow a better person if I manage to experience Samadhi. But I'm still a person. I am a person who has experienced Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So I've got a bigger ego than your ego. These are all, we get caught up in unnecessary things. The only thing we need to know is what we are. That's all we need to try and know. If we focus on that, we will get there quickly. If we allow ourselves to be distracted by all these things, we're just wasting our time.
Michael, if you feel that so strongly and clearly and passionately with your whole being, where was the motivation to write such a big book?
That big book, if you read the big book, it is actually just saying the same thing again in 1,000 different ways. That book is quite small actually. If you read my blog, now since that book I've written, I don't know, there's well over 200 articles there. Some of them are running to 25,000 words. But all of them I'm saying the same thing again and again and again.
So
The only purpose in...
So much
all you can...
Really all that matters is knowing the self.
Yes. All you can learn from all these things is how dense my ignorance is. I think I'm showing off my great knowledge by writing all these things. I'm so knowledgeable about my own teaching. But actually, any wise person seeing what I've written, they'll think, what a fool. Instead of doing what he's writing about, he's just writing about it. So I'm displaying my own ignorance. But actually, if you read what I've written in all those blogs and all those things, it's saying the same thing again and again. But why is it necessary to say the same thing again and again? Because our mind is always trying to slip away from this. We're always trying to complicate things, where Bhagavan is simplifying things. So I'm always, what I'm writing about is how simple it all is. To constantly, I'm trying to remind myself as much as anyone else. Why I think I benefit by writing this blog is people ask questions, and I'm not, I have to admit, my mind is still outward going. I still don't have sufficient love to turn within and merge within. So I'm trying, like we're all trying, but I'm no better than any of, people think, well, because I can explain things well, but I must be more advanced. It's not the case at all. It could be the opposite. Yeah, I mean, I think quite probably. Sometimes I think that I'm probably the worst of all. But so long as our mind is outward going, Bhagavan's teachings is our only. If we cling to Bhagavan's teachings, constantly remind ourselves of how simple it is, and all we have to do is turn within and constantly remind ourselves. That gives us the encouragement to continue trying. And at least when our mind is outward going, at least it's going round and round this flame of Bhagavan's teachings. And one day we'll get too close to the flame and we'll burn in it.
And maybe there's also the element that you were saying earlier of, if it's going to happen, if it's meant to happen.
No, that is absolutely not the case. Because what is meant to happen is according to destiny. This has absolutely nothing to do with destiny. Because destiny is the result of karma. And karma can never give liberation.
So the book isn't the result of karma?
The book is the result of karma,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But because of course writing and thinking and all these things, they're all actions.
Yeah.
But the moksha is when we give up all these actions, then only there is moksha. Because who is the one who is doing all this? It is the ego. The first action, the root of all action, is the rising of the ego. So it's where all action ceases, but moksha is attained. And so it's not attained according to prarabdha. Prarabdha can never give us moksha. It's attained by love. Only when we cultivate the love to turn within. And just like when those 20 years I was living in Tirunelveli, I was walking round and round the hill like a lunatic. I continue in my mind going round and round Bhagavan's teachings like a lunatic, because I may not yet have enough love to merge in Bhagavan completely, but at least by keeping my mind on Bhagavan's teachings, I'm afraid saved from all the other pitfalls that I could be falling into. And one day, I hope he will give me the love that I'm looking for to merge in him.
I think there's another angle to this. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many different
Yeah.
perspectives and angles. But as the mind becomes purer, then from a certain angle, it becomes more of an instrument of doing what is needed
Yes.
for the universal manifestation.
Yes.
So that might be, for example, being kind to animals, or
Yeah.
writing a book that will benefit so-called others.
Yes.
So I think that's another.
Yes, that may be, but that shouldn't be our aim.
No.
But Bhagavan says in one verse in Guru Vachaka Guruvai, surrendering yourself to God with an idea that you should become an instrument of God is a blemish on pure self-surrender. We shouldn't want to be anything.
You do it for its own sake, but then
Yes, yeah,
things
yeah. Yeah, maybe. Yes.
Good morning to you.
All right.
So I just wanted to ask, so if the self is the ultimate reality, which is by far greater than this illusory world we live in,
Yes.
how can it take over? I mean, how can the illusion that we live in take over something that is more superior?
Now you've just asked me a question, but even Bhagavan wasn't able to answer this question. Because Bhagavan wasn't able to answer the question, he used to evade it. You know how he used to evade it? He used to say, see whether it's happened. This ignorance is for whom? For the ego. See whether there's an ego. Why even Bhagavan cannot answer this question, Because you're asking me, how was the barren woman's son born? If she's a barren woman, no son was born. The ego is compared to the son of a barren woman. It has never existed. So Bhagavan actually, when I said he was a Vedi, he wasn't really a Vedi. He was giving the only useful answer there is. If we assume this has existed, we say all this exists, nobody can explain it. Because it's Maya, it doesn't actually exist. The only useful answer that can be given to all such questions is, who says there is a world? Who says there is illusion? Who says there is ignorance? It's I. So who is this I? If you look at it, this I disappears, and what remains is what we really are.
So it's always turning back.
Turning back within. Yeah. Okay.
So can I just ask you one more question?
Yes.
So obviously being in this path of Advaita has great benefits that we overlook, you know, because we tend to focus so much on the ego. So could you maybe explain to us what are the benefits since that you've been...
Well, when you say focus on the ego, what do you mean by focus on the ego? You mean we're wrapped up in our own ego?
Yes.
That is, but the nature of the ego is to be wrapped up in the person that it takes itself to be. But that's why I was saying earlier, there's a difference between the person and the ego. The person, Michael, is not the ego. Michael is the person that the ego now takes as itself. So when I'm wrapped up in thinking always about Michael and about Michael's little life, Michael's little interest, whether other people like Michael or dislike Michael, whether they appreciate his great vast learning and everything or whatever it is, I am not wrapped up. I am wrapped up in the person the ego takes myself to be. Bhagavan says, forget that person. That person is not what you are. That person is not even the culprit. Michael is innocent. But who is the one who takes Michael as I? He is the guilty party. He is the one we should be dealing with. He or she or it or whatever. I mean, gender doesn't matter, of course. Because it is the ego. It is the guilty party. So what is that ego? Who is this I who now rises and says, I am Michael? That is what we have to deal with. That is, we should, instead of concentrating on the person that we take ourselves to be, we should concentrate on the one who is taking that person to be I. Yes, that is the benefit of Advaita. Because if we focus our attention on the one who takes this person to be I, that one will disappear, the ego will disappear, and what remains is, then only it is Advaita. This is all Dvaita. Yes.
Can you say something about the Viruddha Gita?
Yes.
During certain periods, did Bhagavan fight as an adult? Chanting was a good thing?
People love to say Bhagavan recommended this book or that book. Ribhu Gita was one text that people do tend to recite. It's a very simple text. It's basically, it's a very, very repetitive text. It's basically saying, I am not this body, I am consciousness. In so many different ways. It's a bit like my books and my blogs. It's saying the same thing again and again. But the difference is, whereas in Ribhu Gita, it's basically saying, I am not this, I am that. According to Bhagavan, saying I am this is ignorance, saying I am that is equally ignorance. The only truth is I am I. And I am I is not a statement. I can go around saying I am I, but it's the ego who's saying that. The experience I am I, the experience I am nothing but myself, I am nothing but that pure self-awareness. That is the real experience. That is not a thought. Thinking I am pure self-awareness is not going to get us there. We have to turn within and experience that. So to encourage people to understand the basic principles of Advaita, recitation of texts like Vibhu Gita can be beneficial. So when people recited it, Bhagavan encouraged that. But that is not, it's a very, that's like learning your multiplication table when you're at school. It's learning the basic principles. But it's not sufficient for the PhD. If you want the PhD text is Uludunapadu. That is where Bhagavan has really given me the practical application. Vibhu Gita is fine on the theory, but how to actually apply that theory in practice is what Bhagavan teaches us in Uludunapadu, Nanya and such texts.
Well, it's quite a question. This kind of thing of oneness,
Yes.
the ego.
Yes.
I mean, I have this memory, comes back,
Yes.
being a little child,
Yes.
and being very much with this kind of oneness, and then having a name, which at that time was Meera,
Yes.
and sort of not being quite sure, but conditioning myself to say, that's me,
Yes.
Meera.
Yes. Yes.
But what was that? I mean,
Well,
what I mean is that we arrive with the ego.
Yes.
Something then that we
Yes.
create.
Yes.
Because that sort of thing.
Bhagavan sometimes used to say about little children, their horns haven't yet sprouted. Their horns haven't yet sprouted. That means we come with all these vasanas, but as a small child we seem to be so innocent.
Then the vasanas sort of
Then we sprout our horns and become very dangerous. So long as we're a little child, the vasanas are still there in seed form, they haven't yet sprouted. So we're not so dangerous as a small child. But we're
dangerous in what way?
dangerous as an ego.
Dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah.
So in other words, that experience of oneness is just with not quite
it's not yet fully grasped.
right.
So if we could, like Christ said, if you want to enter the kingdom of heaven, you have to become like the little babes. That means you have to become so simple and pure, like a small child. The child is outwardly pure, inwardly not pure, because inside there are so many vasanas are there waiting to sprout. A demon like Hitler or Stalin or such a person, as a small child, they'll just be like any other small child. Well, even small children, you can begin to see the ego. If you watch little children playing, you can see the competition between them. It's all beginning from there, but it takes its full form. I mean, the more we develop as a person, the more our vasanas come out, and the more it becomes clear what sort of quality of person we are.
But we also can't blame Hitler because it was his karma.
What?
We can't blame Hitler for what he did because it was his karma. Whatever is meant to happen will happen.
Yes, but how did he get such a karma?
Past life. And
Yes,
present-
yes, but we are responsible for our prarabdha. If our prarabdha is the fruit of our past actions, we can't say, oh, it was a murderer can't murder someone and say in court, oh, it was my destiny. I couldn't help myself. That's no excuse. If a murderer is sent to a prison or whatever, we could say it's his destiny to be a murderer and it's his destiny to be in prison. But what gave him that such a destiny is because of bad karmas he did in the past. So whatever we experience is a result of our past karmas. But that doesn't exonerate us. We have to assume, in order to live in a civil society, we have to assume that things are not destined to happen as they're destined to happen. Otherwise we'd all be running amok. So we should outwardly behave as if we're responsible for every action we do. But inwardly we should, why Bhagavan said what he said to his mother is not for us just to claim, oh, I'm not responsible for any of my actions.
But for such a big thing to happen,
Well, yes, it was the destiny of so many people, but I don't think we can say Hitler was innocent.
no, I'm not saying that he is, but maybe he didn't have a choice.
Well, yeah, obviously it was his destiny to be the instrument in the destiny of so many other people, terrible destiny of so many other people. But to be chosen for such a destiny, I think is, well, it seems to me, but of course we can't say what karmas people have done in the past, but if people do bad karmas in this lifetime, we can be pretty sure it's the result of previous use of their free will in a wrong way.
No, Michael, it's just that
Because ultimately, every prarabdha is the fruit of our past actions. What action? If whatever we do according to, that's why I was saying earlier, supposing it's your destiny to become a rich businesswoman, and you become a rich businesswoman, by becoming a rich businesswoman, you're not, that isn't going to produce any fruit because that's your destiny. But most people who become rich business people, they do so with great desire. Because often our agamya, we're using our free will. It just so happens many people try to become rich business people, only a few succeed. Those few who succeed are those whose destiny happens to coincide with their free will. There are very few people who become rich business people without wanting to become rich business people. It can happen, but it doesn't. Generally, it's it's not because of their desire to become a rich business person, it's because they're destined to become a rich business person, but they also have that desire to become. Because they have a desire and they're therefore doing it with their own, using their free will, which happens just by chance, it happens to be in accordance with their prarabdha, but they're still creating fresh karma. Because what creates fresh karma is the use we make of our free will. So if we use our free will in any way other than to turn within, we are creating agamya. So whatever we experience now as prarabdha is the result of use we have made of our free will in the past.
Who has the free will? Is it the ego?
Ego, yes.
Ego.
Yes.
So ego has a free will.
Yes. But the only way to get this free will, it causes us a great deal of trouble, doesn't it? Because of this, we need to give up our free will. But we cannot give up our free will so long as we have the ego. However much we try to surrender our will to the will of God, so long as we experience ourselves as a person, so long as we rise as an ego to experience ourselves as a person, we still have our likes and dislikes. So in order to surrender ourselves completely to God, to surrender our will completely to God, we have to surrender the one who has that will. That is the ego.
How does this, what you've just been saying, fit in with the notion that this is a dream?
In a dream, for every dream there is a destiny. But in the dream
But the responsibility bit I'm getting, I mean, we're in a dream, we wouldn't, as a character in the dream, our dream, we may say, oh, I'm kind of responsible. But then we wake up and in what sense have I been responsible for what occurs in the dream?
If you wake up from this dream, wake up not in the sense of waking up into another dream, but if you wake up into the real state, if you wake up to what you really are, you're not responsible for any of the karmas. Sometime in future, assuming this is based on the assumption that there are many egos, which Bhagavan said there's only one ego, but let us say there are many egos. There's a Hitler ego, and there's a Stalin ego, and there's a Genghis Khan ego. All these egos, eventually, however evil they may be, eventually after crores and crores and crores of births or dreams, whatever we call it, they will suffer, and they will slowly, their mind will be purified, and eventually they will too will, because Bhagavan says in the last verse of Arunachashtakam, just like a bird was flying in the sky, has no rest until it comes back to earth, just like the water evaporated from the sea has no rest until it rains on the hills, flows down, gets caught in the lake, overflows the lake, goes down, and eventually until it merges back in the ocean, there's no rest for it. So also there is no rest for the jiva, which has risen from Shiva, from the source, until it eventually merges back. So eventually everyone has to merge back. But actually there's no everyone to merge back, there's only one. If you merge back, that is sufficient. We'll all go along with you. We're all waiting, actually, we are all waiting here for you to get liberated, and then we'll be liberated with you. In that case, if you're threatening us like that, then I'll try myself. Yes. Well, I mean, again, karma theory, it is, people understand the karma theory in many different ways, and it has been interpreted in many different ways. Bhagavan gave it in a very, Bhagavan went along with the typical, the basic Vedantic view of karma, which is that what we use our free will to do creates agamya, that's a fresh action. The fruits of that get stored in sanchita, which sanchita means store. It's a big store. In every life, we are only able to experience whatever, 60, 70, 80 years of experience. That's all we can experience, that number of days of thing. So in a lifetime, we can only experience a limited amount of fruits of past karma. But don't we all have desires for so many things which we can't experience? Don't we make so much effort for things which we, how many of our efforts actually fructify? So in every life, we are actually accumulating more fresh karma, but we are exhausting fruit. So the amount of karmas in our sanchita is ever growing. So we cannot get liberation just by trying to exhaust what is in sanchita, because as we're exhausting it, we're creating more. So the only way to get liberation is to cut up the root of it all, which is the ego. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a shortcut, but it's the only way. There's no alternative longer way. Because whatever other longer route we take, we come back to the point, we have to kill this ego before we can get out of this mess. Because the ego is the cause of the mess. So long as this ego is there, we cannot get out. And we cannot destroy the ego by any means other than by looking at it. Just like however much you beat that poor snake lying on the ground, you can never kill it. Because it's already dead, it's just a rope. The only way to kill it is to look at it carefully and see that it's not a snake at all.
Well, when you say look,
we say words, look at it means, obviously we can't look at the ego. The ego isn't a physical thing. Even if we look within, try to see the ego. Have you ever seen your ego? No. We all say I. But if we look to see what is this I that is saying, I am sitting here, I am talking, I am 60 years old, I have this past life, I mean I've lived for the past 60 years, I've got so many stories I can tell about my life. Who is this I? If we look for it, we can't find it because it doesn't exist. The only way to get rid of it is to look very, very carefully for it, and by trying to see it, we will see what we really are. And then the game is over, story is ended.
spend a moment on the methodology of this. I've read that if you find where the I is located, you then try and hold on to it for as long as you can.
What do you mean where it is located?
Well, let's put it this way. If I say I,
Yes.
I feel it's coming from a place in myself.
What is yourself?
Well, a place in my body.
In your body?
Yes.
Right. Well, Bhagavan did sometimes say, try to see where in the body this rises. But he's not asking us to look for a place. Because if you look, in order to find the place where, if a mouse has come out of some hole, we want to find which is the hole the mouse is coming out of. We have to follow the mouse. If we let our attention, if we look around, is there a hole here or there, we've lost the mouse. The mouse is hidden somewhere. So in order to find where the mouse is coming out, we have to keep our attention fixed very keenly on the mouse and not let it shift from our view. When it goes behind there, we see it. Eventually we see it going into its hole. When it goes into its hole, it's disappeared. So also if we follow this ego so vigilantly, looking for it, when it disappears in its hole, because we are the ego who's looking, we also disappear along with it. There will never be a place found for it. The place from which it rises is ourself. Bhagavan used the word, because no words can adequately describe this, Bhagavan often spoke in metaphorical terms. So he often says, seeking the place from which the ego rises. And he talks about the rising place of the rising ego. The rising place, or the place from which it rises, is ourself. It can't be from the body, because the body doesn't exist before the ego rises. How can the ego rise from something that comes into existence only because the ego rises? The ego can only rise from one place, and that is from ourself. So by looking very carefully at the ego, we merge back into what we actually are. I mean sinking or merging or diving. These are Bhagavan is using these in an allegorical sense, in a metaphorical sense. He is using these terms. We cannot literally dive into ourselves. We're not a pool of water that we can dive into. But he says, like diving into water to find something that has fallen there. Or he says, like the pearl diver diving within. These are analogies. He's not asking us to take it literally. What diving within means is attending to ourselves, and when we attend to ourselves, we subside back into the source from which we have risen. The source from which we have risen is ourself. So if we try to interpret Bhagavan's words too literally, we will misunderstand them, because why he used metaphorical terms, because it is something that's beyond conception. So it can be expressed best in a figurative or metaphorical sense. That's it, but these are all clues. What actually it is. There is no methodology. What is the methodology for seeing the sun? It's looking up in the sky. Is that a big methodology? So this is the simplest of all simple practices. So it's not a technique, it's not a methodology. It is simply turning and looking. Looking at what we are. Metaphorically, Bhagavan describes looking at ourselves. The more keenly we look at ourselves, the more metaphorically we can say we are diving within. It's not a literal diving, but it's a focusing of our attention. Bhagavan also gives the analogy of a pile of cotton in the sunshine. The sunshine alone won't burn the cotton, but if you take a lens, you have to adjust the distance of the lens from the cotton until you get a very sharp, bright point. Then only the cotton will burn. So that focusing of our attention on ourselves is what is metaphorically said as diving deep within.
When he says the Atman is 2 inches away from the center
He didn't say Atman. He said when Bhagavan referred to us, talked about Hridaya or Ulam, they're words which means heart. Heart means core, the center. Bhagavan is using these terms in a metaphorical sense. But there are some people, among Bhagavan's devotees, there were some people who were very much caught up in, who were very much enamored with yoga and all this idea of the 6 chakras and everything. So these people used to ask Bhagavan, I mean, it was mainly with Kavirganta and his followers. Kavirganta used to argue the highest of all the chakras is the Sahasrara. We have to raise to the Sahasrara, and then we have to go out through the Sahasrara in order to merge with the universal consciousness. That was Kavirganta's idea. He often used to argue with Bhagavan, why you say the heart, when obviously the heart is lower down, the chakra, the Sahasrara is the highest. That is where you have to go. Bhagavan says the Sahasrara is not the ultimate. The ultimate is only the heart. Then where in the heart is the body? Where in the body is the heart? Bhagavan said, heart means yourself. It's not a place in the body. But they kept on insisting, is it the same as the Anahata chakra? Bhagavan said no. So eventually when they continued asking, Bhagavan said, in relation to the body, relative to the body, where the ego rises in the body is from 2 digits to the center of the chest. As we can see, if you ask a small boy to run and deliver the post, when he volunteers, he doesn't say, if you ask who delivered the post, the little boy won't point to his legs and say, I did. He said, I did. If you ask him to do a mathematical sum and then ask, who did the sum? He says, I did. He doesn't say, I did. We all point to our chest when we're pointing to ourselves, because that is from the relative to our body, that is the point where we feel we are centered. So Bhagavan said, Sahasrara is not the final one of the chakras. It's the Sushumna is like a question mark. It goes up to the top and then it comes down. Where it comes down is 2 digits to right from the center of the chest. But Bhagavan made it very clear, that is not our self. Our self isn't here. That is what he called Hridaya Sthana, the place of the heart. But that is not Hridayam. There's a difference between Hridaya Sthana, and it's only for people whose minds are who are not, Bhagavan has said, you are not the body. In one verse in Ekatma Panchakam, he said, people who think that self is in the body are like people who think the screen is in the picture. The picture is projected on the screen, the body is projected on ourself. So it's our self, the ego rises within ourself. It cannot rise out of ourself. It rises within ourself, projects the mind, projects the world. It's all within ourself. So everything is within ourselves. We are not within anything. Because we experience ourselves as this ego, we seem to be within this body. And where we seem to be centered in this body is here. But that's only relative to the body. But Bhagavan made it very clear. When people said, then Bhagavan, should we meditate here in order to meditate on the self? Bhagavan said, no. Meditation should only be on I. Not on any place in the body. Because again, we're confusing ourselves. We want to separate ourselves from this body, not to meditate on the body.